My name is Alicia Monroe, and for the longest time, I believed that loyalty was the strongest foundation a person could build a life on. I was wrong. The lesson cost me almost everything. 6 months before my wedding, life seemed perfect from the outside. I was 32 years old, owner of a growing interior design firm in Atlanta and engaged to Marcus Reed, a successful real estate developer, whose face appeared regularly in local business magazines. People constantly told us we looked like the perfect couple. The truth was more complicated. Marcus and I had been together for 7 years. 7 years of sacrifices. 7 years of compromises. 7 years of believing we were building a future together. I had supported him long before the expensive suits, luxury cars, and exclusive business events. Back when he was struggling to secure financing for his first project, I was the one helping him review contracts late at night. When investors rejected him repeatedly, I was the one encouraging him not to quit. When money became tight, I quietly paid bills without making him feel embarrassed. I never kept score. Love wasn't supposed to be a transaction. At least that's what I believed. The wedding itself was becoming one of the largest social events our families had ever hosted. My mother, Evelyn Monroe, was obsessed with every detail. The flowers must be perfect, she kept saying. The guest list must be perfect. The venue must be perfect. Everything had to be perfect. Meanwhile, my younger sister Vanessa seemed unusually interested in the planning process. At first, I appreciated her help. She accompanied me to dress fittings. She attended cake tastings. She reviewed invitations. She even volunteered to coordinate with several vendors. "You're lucky to have me," she joked one afternoon. We were sitting at a cafe reviewing floral arrangements. I laughed. "I know," she smiled. But there was something strange behind that smile. Something I couldn't quite identify. At the time, I ignored it. Looking back, I should have paid attention. Vanessa had always been competitive. Growing up, she hated standing in anyone's shadow. If I earned an award in school, she wanted to. If I received praise, she needed more. If someone complimented me, she found a way to redirect attention toward herself. As adults, the rivalry appeared less obvious. Or so I thought. One evening, I arrived unexpectedly at Marcus's downtown office. I wanted to surprise him with dinner. His assistant smiled nervously when I entered. "Mr. Reed isn't here." "Really?" "He left about 30 minutes ago." That wasn't unusual. Business meetings happened all the time. But something felt off. I called Marcus. No answer. I sent a text. No response. Hours passed. Still nothing. Near midnight, my phone finally buzzed. "Sorry, babe. Investor dinner ran late. Love you." I stared at the message. Something felt wrong. But I convinced myself I was overthinking. Successful relationships required trust. At least that's what everyone said. Over the following weeks, Marcus became increasingly distant. Not dramatically. Not enough to trigger immediate suspicion. Just small changes. Subtle changes. Dangerous changes. His phone was always face down. He stepped outside to take calls. He cancelled date nights. He became distracted during conversations. Sometimes he looked at me without really seeing me, as if his mind were somewhere else entirely. One night, while lying in bed beside him, I asked the question that had been bothering me. "Are you happy?" Marcus looked surprised. "Of course." "You seem different." He laughed. Wedding stress? I wanted to believe him. So I did. Because love often convinces us to ignore what logic is desperately trying to reveal. A few days later, my friend Jasmine invited me to lunch. The moment I sat down, I noticed her expression. She looked uncomfortable, concerned, almost guilty. "What is it?" I asked. She hesitated. "I might be wrong." "About what?" She took a deep breath. "I saw Marcus." My stomach tightened. Okay. He wasn't alone. The restaurant suddenly felt smaller, louder, hotter. My heartbeat accelerated. "Who was he with?" Jasmine looked away. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Vanessa." I laughed immediately, a nervous laugh, an automatic laugh. "That's impossible." "I know how it sounds. They probably had wedding business." Jasmine didn't answer. That silence terrified me more than words ever could. "What aren't you telling me?" Her eyes filled with sympathy. "They didn't look like siblings planning a wedding." The drive home felt endless. My thoughts raced. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. No. 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 This couldn't be happening. Vanessa was my sister. Marcus was my fiancé. People don't betray family like that, do they? The rational part of my mind demanded evidence, not assumptions, not rumors. Evidence. The next few days became unbearable. I watched. I listened. I paid attention. For the first time in months, I stopped trusting blindly. Patterns emerged immediately. Marcus disappeared at predictable times. Vanessa became mysteriously unavailable during those same periods. Texts went unanswered. Calls were ignored. Excuses multiplied. Each coincidence chipped away at the wall of denial protecting my heart. Then came the final piece. The piece that shattered everything. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. I was finalizing seating arrangements at the wedding venue when I realized I had left an important folder at Marcus's penthouse. Using my spare key, I entered quietly. The apartment was empty. At least I thought it was. Then I heard voices. Laughter. Coming from the balcony. I froze. Marcus. Vanessa. For one brief second, I considered announcing myself. Then I heard my name. And everything changed. Elisa will never figure it out, Vanessa said. Both of them laughed. My entire body went cold. I moved closer. Every instinct screamed at me to stop listening. But I couldn't. I needed the truth. No matter how painful. The wedding is only 3 weeks away, Marcus said. That's why it's perfect. Perfect. My heart pounded violently. Vanessa laughed again. I still can't believe she trusts us this much, Marcus answered with a chuckle. She's always trusted everyone. The cruelty in his voice stunned me. This wasn't the man I thought I knew. This wasn't the woman who shared my childhood. These were strangers, dangerous strangers. I stepped closer, and then I heard the words that destroyed the future. I had spent 7 years building. I can't wait until everyone sees us together, Vanessa said. Marcus kissed her. I heard it. I didn't need to see it. The sound alone was enough. Enough to break something inside me forever. Tears filled my eyes. My breathing became shallow. The world blurred. 7 years. Gong. In a single moment. I should have confronted them. I should have screamed. I should have demanded answers. Instead, I quietly backed away. Because something inside me suddenly understood a painful truth. People who betray you have usually been betraying you long before you discover it. I left the penthouse unnoticed. I sat inside my car for nearly an hour, crying, thinking, remembering every sacrifice, every promise, every lie. The wedding was now only weeks away. My fiancé was in love with my sister, and neither of them had any idea that I finally knew the truth. What they didn't realize was that the wedding day they had carefully planned for their victory was about to become something none of us would ever forget. I barely slept during the next 3 weeks. Every morning, I woke up hoping the nightmare had somehow been a misunderstanding. Every morning, reality returned. Marcus and Vanessa continued pretending nothing had happened. They smiled. They lied. They acted as though they were innocent. And I played my role perfectly. I smiled back. I attended meetings. I discussed wedding details. I answered family calls. Not once did I reveal what I knew. For the first time in my life, I understood something important. Sometimes the strongest response to betrayal is not immediate confrontation. Sometimes it's patience. Sometimes it's allowing people enough rope to expose themselves completely. The wedding day finally arrived on a warm Saturday afternoon in Atlanta. The venue looked like something from a luxury magazine. White roses covered every archway. Crystal decorations sparkled beneath the sunlight. Luxury vehicles lined the entrance. Hundreds of guests arrived wearing designer suits and elegant gowns. Everyone believed they were about to witness the beginning of a beautiful marriage. No one knew they were actually about to witness the collapse of several lives. Inside the bridal suite, makeup artists and assistants moved around nervously. My wedding dress hung near the window. It was beautiful. Months earlier, I'd imagined walking down the aisle wearing it. Now it felt like a costume from another person's life. My mother entered carrying a glass of water. You look stunning. I smiled politely. Thank you. She adjusted my veil. You should be excited. If only she knew. If only any of them knew. The door opened again. Vanessa walked inside. For a moment, neither of us spoke. My chest tightened. She was beautiful, confident, and completely unaware that her secret had already been exposed. "How are you feeling?" she asked. I looked directly into her eyes. "Better than you think." Something about my answer seemed to confuse her, but only briefly. She quickly recovered her smile. "I can't wait to see you walk down the aisle." The irony was almost unbearable. I nearly laughed. Instead, I simply nodded. "Neither can I." A few minutes later, she left the room. The moment the door closed, I exhaled slowly. The performance was almost over. Outside, guests continued filling their seats. Meanwhile, another guest arrived quietly, a man named David Carter. I noticed him through the window as he stepped out of an older pickup truck. Compared to the luxury vehicles surrounding him, his truck looked completely out of place. He wore a clean but inexpensive suit. Nothing flashy, nothing impressive. Just simple, respectable. He had come as the guest of one of the venue managers who happened to be a longtime friend. At the time, I had no idea that meeting him would change my entire future. An hour later, the ceremony began. Music echoed through the estate. Guests stood. Phones appeared. Cameras flashed. The atmosphere felt magical, exactly the kind of wedding people dreamed about. But beneath the surface, tension was building. I stood near the entrance waiting for my cue. The coordinator approached me. "It's time." I nodded. My heart felt strangely calm. Not because I wasn't hurting, because I was finished being afraid. The doors opened. Every guest turned toward me. For several seconds, the world became silent. I began walking forward, step by step. Slowly, gracefully, the way every bride imagines. People smiled. Some cried. Others recorded the moment. At the altar stood Marcus. Handsome, confident, smug. As though he had already won. As though I were too blind to see the truth. I continued walking. 1 step. 2 steps. 3. Then something happened. Movement appeared near the front rows. Whispers spread through the crowd. Confused voices emerged. Heads turned. I followed their gaze. And there she was. Vanessa. Wearing a wedding dress. A wedding dress. For several seconds, guests thought there had been some mistake. Some kind of surprise performance. Then Marcus smiled. Not at me. At her. The crowd collectively gasped. My mother stood up immediately. What is happening? No one answered. Vanessa slowly approached the altar. Proud, confident, victorious. Marcus stepped forward and took her hand. The silence became unbearable. Then Marcus finally spoke. Alicia. His voice carried through the microphone. Guests stared in disbelief. I never intended to hurt you. A few people gasped. Others looked horrified. My mother looked ready to collapse. Marcus continued. But sometimes people discover who they're truly meant to be with. The arrogance in his tone made several guests visibly uncomfortable. Vanessa squeezed his hand, smiling, as if this humiliation was some romantic fairy tale. We fell in love, she announced. Murmurs exploded throughout the audience. Phones immediately began recording. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. Neither sister, nor fiancé, nor family, nor guests had ever witnessed anything this outrageous. My mother began crying. Several relatives started arguing. One elderly guest actually stood up and left. Marcus seemed convinced he was delivering a beautiful speech. Instead, he was destroying every ounce of respect people had for him. Then Vanessa looked directly at me. A smile appeared on her face. A victorious smile. A cruel smile. A smile that said, I won. The old Alicia might have broken down. The old Alicia might have cried. The old Alicia might have begged for answers. But that woman no longer existed. I calmly removed my veil. The crowd watched in complete confusion. Marcus frowned. Vanessa's smile faded slightly. Something wasn't going according to plan. Good. I stepped closer to the microphone. The venue became silent once again. I have something to say. Every eye focused on me. For the first time all day, Marcus looked nervous. Vanessa too. I smiled. Not because I was happy, because I was free. I discovered the truth 3 weeks ago. Their faces changed instantly. Shock, fear, panic. The crowd erupted into whispers. I heard both of you discussing your relationship. Now the guests looked at Marcus and Vanessa differently, not as lovers, as liars, as traitors. As painful as it was, I'm grateful. Marcus blinked. What? I'm grateful. The audience looked confused. So grateful that today I decided not to lose anything. Silence. What are you talking about? Vanessa asked. I scanned the crowd. Hundreds of faces stared back. Then my eyes landed on David Carter, the quiet single father sitting near the back, the man who had spent the entire ceremony observing silently, the man I had spoken with, briefly during rehearsal week after, discovering his daughter loved interior design, a decent man, an honest man, a man whose character stood in complete contrast to the people who had betrayed me. I took a deep breath. Then I made the decision that would shock everyone present, including myself. David. His eyes widened. The crowd turned toward him. Would you please come here? The entire venue fell silent, and for the first time all afternoon, Marcus and Vanessa no longer looked victorious. They looked terrified. The entire venue was silent. Hundreds of guests turned toward David Carter. He remained seated for several seconds, clearly stunned. Even I couldn't believe the words that had just come out of my mouth. This hadn't been part of any plan. I simply knew one thing. I refused to let Marcus and Vanessa define how my story ended. David slowly stood. Are you sure? He asked. His voice wasn't dramatic, comma. It wasn't heroic. It was sincere. That alone separated him from everyone standing at the altar. I nodded. More sure than I've been about anything all day. The crowd erupted into whispers. Marcus looked furious. Vanessa looked completely confused. My mother stared at me as if she had forgotten how to breathe. David walked toward the front. Every step seemed to make Marcus more uncomfortable. When David finally reached me, he lowered his voice. Alicia, you don't have to do this because you're hurting. I looked directly at him. That's exactly why I'm doing it. For the first time all day, I felt calm. Not because the pain had disappeared, because I had stopped allowing betrayal to control me. David studied my face carefully. Then he smiled slightly. A warm smile. A genuine smile. The kind that asks for nothing in return. If we do this, he said quietly, it will be with honesty. I nodded. Honesty sounds pretty good right now. Several guests laughed softly. The tension eased slightly. Meanwhile, Marcus stepped forward. This is ridiculous. No one paid attention to him. That seemed to irritate him even more. You can't just marry a stranger. David finally turned toward him. No, he replied calmly. You can't spend years lying to someone and expect respect afterward. The crowd immediately reacted. Several people even applauded. Marcus's face darkened. For perhaps the first time in his life, he realized he was losing control of the room. Vanessa crossed her arms. You think this makes you look strong? I looked at her. No. She frowned. Then why are you doing it? I took a slow breath. Because strength isn't pretending betrayal didn't happen. The venue became quiet again. Strength is choosing who you become after it happens. Even Vanessa had no response. Karma. A local pastor who had been hired for the original ceremony stepped forward. He looked bewildered. I honestly don't know what's happening anymore. Laughter spread through the audience. Even my mother managed a small smile through her tears. The pastor looked at David. Son, are you willing to stand here beside this woman? David glanced at me. Comma. Then he answered. Yes. The response was simple. No speech. No performance. Just honesty. The pastor turned toward me. And are you willing to stand beside this man? I looked at David, not Marcus, not Vanessa, not the crowd. Just David, the only person standing there without selfish motives. Yes. The guests erupted into applause. Marcus looked like he might explode. Vanessa seemed unable to process what was happening. For the first time all day, they were no longer the center of attention. The ceremony itself was brief, unexpected, imperfect, and somehow more genuine than the wedding originally planned. When it ended, people stood cheering, not because they understood everything, but because they recognized courage when they saw it. Then came the moment no one would ever forget. David suddenly lifted me into his arms. The crowd gasped. Comma. Then laughed and applauded. The photographers immediately rushed forward. Camera flashes exploded everywhere. For a brief moment, our eyes met. Neither of us spoke. We simply smiled. And somehow that felt enough. As David carried me down the aisle, I noticed Marcus and Vanessa standing beside a luxury convertible near the entrance. Hours earlier, they had imagined driving away as the victorious couple. Now they stood watching the celebration happen without them. Marcus raised his hand. Almost as if he wanted to stop us. Comma. Almost as if he wanted a second chance. But second chances belong to people who respect the first one. David continued walking. The guests followed behind us. Music filled the air. Sunlight reflected off the marble walls of the estate, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something unexpected. Hope. I had no idea what the future would look like. I didn't know whether this strange decision would become a blessing or a disaster. What I did know was this: the man carrying me away from that wedding wasn't pretending to be someone he wasn't. And after everything I had been through, honesty felt more valuable than any luxury car, designer suit, or perfect wedding ever could. What none of the guests knew was that David Carter's story was far more complicated than it appeared. Everyone saw a struggling single father. Everyone saw an old pickup truck. Everyone saw an ordinary man. But over the coming months, the truth would emerge. And when it did, Marcus and Vanessa would realize they hadn't simply lost a wedding. They had underestimated a man whose greatest strength had never been his money. It had always been his character. 3 months passed after the wedding. To the surprise of nearly everyone, David and I didn't rush into some fairy tale romance. Instead, we built something far more valuable: trust. Every morning, David woke up before sunrise. He prepared breakfast for Maya before school. He packed her lunch. He helped with homework. He attended every school event. He never complained. Watching him changed me. For years I had mistaken confidence for character. Marcus had always looked successful. David actually was successful where it mattered most. One evening we sat together on the porch of the modest house he shared with Maya. The sunset painted the sky orange. Maya was playing in the yard. I smiled. "You know, most people still think you're poor." David laughed. "I'm aware. Doesn't it bother you?" He shook his head. "People have the right to their opinions, even when they're wrong." He smiled. "Especially when they're wrong." That answer stayed with me, because David never seemed interested in proving anything. He simply lived according to his values. A week later, I finally learned part of the truth. It happened by accident. I was organizing paperwork in his home office when I discovered several financial reports. At first, I assumed they belonged to one of his clients. Then I noticed his name: David Carter, managing partner. I frowned. The numbers didn't make sense. Several properties, multiple commercial buildings, investment accounts, business ownership documents, millions of dollars in assets. I stared at the papers, certain I was misunderstanding something. When David entered the room, I held up one of the folders. "What exactly is this?" He immediately realized what I had found. For several seconds he remained silent. Then he sighed. I was hoping to explain later. I blinked. "Explain what?" He sat down across from me. "The truth." The conversation that followed changed everything. Years earlier, after losing his wife to illness, David had focused entirely on raising Maya. While working long hours, he quietly invested every extra dollar he could save. He purchased small rental properties, then another, and another. Over time, those investments grew. He partnered with experienced business owners, reinvested profits, avoided unnecessary debt, ignored pressure to show off his wealth. While other people chased appearances, David built stability, patiently, quietly, for years. "Why keep it secret?" I asked. David shrugged. "Because money attracts the wrong kind of attention." I couldn't argue with that. After everything I had experienced, I understood exactly what he meant. Meanwhile, Marcus's life was heading in the opposite direction. The image he had worked so hard to maintain was beginning to crack. His latest development project had gone massively over budget. Investors were asking questions. Loans were coming due, and Vanessa's expensive lifestyle wasn't helping. One afternoon, news spread through Atlanta's business community. Marcus's company was facing serious financial difficulties. The story appeared in several local publications. People began talking, speculating, wondering how someone who looked so successful could be struggling behind the scenes. The answer was simple. Marcus spent years chasing status. David spent years building value. Those two paths often look similar at first. Eventually they become very different. A month later, David and I attended a charity fundraiser. The ballroom was filled with executives, investors, and community leaders. As we entered, several people immediately approached David. Their reactions shocked me. "David, good to see you." We've been trying to reach you about the partnership. Congratulations on the latest acquisition. I watched the conversations unfold. These weren't casual acquaintances. These were influential business leaders. People who genuinely respected him, not because of his money, because of his reputation, integrity, reliability, wisdom. Everything Marcus had sacrificed in pursuit of appearances. Then something unexpected happened. Across the ballroom stood Marcus and Vanessa. The moment they saw David speaking with some of the city's most powerful investors, their expressions changed. Confusion, then disbelief, then panic. Vanessa whispered something to Marcus. Marcus immediately looked away, as though refusing to accept reality. For months they had mocked the man they believed was a struggling single father. Now they were watching influential executives seek his advice, watching investors treat him like an equal, watching doors open for him effortlessly, not because he demanded attention, because he had earned respect. As the evening continued, David squeezed my hand gently. You okay? I smiled. More than okay. For the first time since the wedding, I felt truly grateful. Not for the betrayal, not for the pain, but for the lesson hidden inside it. Sometimes losing the wrong people creates space for the right ones. And Marcus and Vanessa were about to learn that lesson the hard way, because the biggest revelation about David Carter had not yet been revealed. 6 months after the wedding, everything finally came full circle. Not because David wanted revenge, not because I wanted revenge, but because reality eventually catches up with everyone. The choices we make today become the life we live tomorrow. And Marcus and Vanessa were about to discover exactly how true that was. One Monday morning, Atlanta's business community woke up to major news. Marcus Reed Development Group had officially entered financial restructuring. Several projects had stalled. Multiple investors had withdrawn support. Lenders were demanding answers. The company that Marcus had spent years using to impress people was collapsing under the weight of poor decisions. The story spread quickly. By lunchtime, everyone was talking about it, including Vanessa. According to mutual friends, the stress inside their relationship had become unbearable. The glamorous social media posts had stopped. The luxury vacations had disappeared. Arguments became frequent. The fantasy they had built their relationship upon was falling apart. Because relationships built on deception rarely survive hardship. Meanwhile, life in our home felt entirely different. Peaceful. Stable. Real. One evening, David and I sat at the kitchen table helping Maya prepare a school presentation about leadership. Leadership isn't about being in charge, Maya said while reading from her notes. It's about helping others succeed. David smiled proudly. That's a good lesson. I laughed. Sounds like someone taught it to you. Maya pointed at her father. He did. David shook his head. But I could see how much the compliment meant to him. Moments like that reminded me why I had fallen in love with him. Not because of his success. Not because of his investments. Not because of his reputation. Because he consistently chose character when nobody was watching. A few weeks later, an unexpected phone call arrived. It was Marcus. The first time he had contacted me since the wedding. I stared at the screen for several seconds. Then I answered. Hello? Silence. Then his voice. Alicia. I immediately noticed how different he sounded. Gone was the confidence. Gone was the arrogance. Gone was the certainty. What do you want, Marcus? Another pause. I owe you an apology. I didn't respond. For years I had imagined hearing those words. Now they felt strangely unimportant. I was selfish, he continued. I hurt you. Yes. I thought I was chasing happiness. I looked out the window. The sun was setting over the yard where Maya was playing. David was helping her practice softball. They were laughing together. A simple moment. A beautiful moment. A real moment. And suddenly I understood something. Marcus wasn't calling because he had changed. He was calling because circumstances had changed. There is a difference. What do you want from me? I asked. His answer came quietly. I just wanted you to know that I was wrong. For the first time I actually believed him. Not because he had become wiser, because failure had finally forced him to confront reality. I hope you learn from it, I said. Then I ended the call. Not out of anger, out of closure. Some chapters don't need to be reopened. A month later, another surprise arrived. Vanessa showed up at my door. When I opened it, I barely recognized her. The confidence was gone. The smugness was gone. The victory she once celebrated had completely disappeared. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then tears filled her eyes. "I'm sorry." The words sounded genuine, painfully genuine. Years earlier, I would have immediately forgiven her. Now I understood forgiveness differently. Forgiveness does not erase consequences. It simply frees you from carrying bitterness. "I know," I said softly. She cried, "I ruined everything." "No." She looked confused. "You made choices." The distinction mattered. Because choices can teach us. Karma. Victimhood rarely does. We talked for nearly an hour, not as rivals, not as enemies, as sisters. For the first time in years, honesty existed between us. When she finally left, I felt lighter, not because the past had disappeared, because I no longer needed it to. That evening, David and I sat on the porch watching the stars appear overhead. The same porch where I had once discovered the truth about him. The same porch where my new life had truly begun. "You ever regret what happened?" he asked. I thought about the question carefully. The betrayal, the humiliation, the wedding, the heartbreak. Then I looked toward the house. Maya was inside laughing at a movie. The warm light from the windows illuminated the yard. The life we had built together felt stronger than anything I had ever imagined. Finally, I smiled. "No." David squeezed my hand. "Neither do I." For a while we sat quietly, listening to the evening breeze, grateful for ordinary moments. Because those ordinary moments are often life's greatest treasures. The truth was simple. Marcus and Vanessa believed wealth, status, and appearances determined a person's value. They judged David by an old pickup truck, by a modest house, by the fact that he was a single father. They never bothered to learn who he truly was. But life's greatest mistake is assuming someone's circumstances reveal their worth. Character reveals worth. Integrity reveals worth. Kindness reveals worth. Responsibility reveals worth. And in the end, those qualities created a future far richer than money alone ever could. The wedding day that began with betrayal ultimately became the beginning of something far greater. Not revenge, not victory, not humiliation. Love, growth, family, and a lesson I would carry for the rest of my life. The people who judge your value by what you have often failed to recognize the person you are. And sooner or later, character will always outperform appearances. Before you go, let's reflect on the lessons from this story. This story isn't really about money, luxury homes, or hidden success. It's about the danger of judging people by appearances. Marcus and Vanessa believed that status, wealth, and public image were the most important things in life. Because of that belief, they overlooked qualities that truly build lasting success: integrity, discipline, responsibility, and loyalty. David's journey teaches an important financial lesson. Real wealth is often built quietly through patience, smart decisions, consistent investing, and long-term thinking rather than trying to impress others. Alicia's journey teaches an emotional lesson. Betrayal can be painful, but it does not have to define your future. Sometimes the most powerful response to being hurt is not revenge, but personal growth and wise decision-making. This story also highlights the importance of healthy relationships. Trust, honesty, and respect are the foundations of strong families and successful partnerships. When those foundations are missing, even relationships that appear perfect from the outside can collapse. Finally, remember this: never measure a person's value by their current circumstances. Some people have money but lack character. Others have character and eventually build everything else. What matters most is not where someone starts, but the values they choose to live by every day. Ask yourself, have you ever judged someone too quickly? What qualities do you believe matter most in a relationship? And what kind of legacy are you building through your own choices? Thank you for listening. And remember, character is an investment that always pays dividends in the long run.